Okay, so you are here talking today about dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline through evidence-based interventions. I'm Dr. Julianne DiCocco. That's very new. I just passed my defense 3 weeks ago, and I'm trying it out. I feel like a major imposter, and I was like, this is a really safe community for me to put doctor on a slide, because I was having major imposter syndrome about it. I just defended. I have a BCBA, and I also have a doctorate in applied behavior analysis, so I'm a behavior analyst freak. And luckily, I've had opportunities to not just work with our traditional autism population that we kind of get roped into oftentimes serving. I work for Union School District, which is here in San Jose. I'm our manager of student support services, so I oversee all of our behavioral interventions across our district. And I also do some inclusion collaborative support with alternative education. For the last 15 years, I have always found a way to continue to work in alt ed. So I support our 2 court schools as well as our North and South County community schools. So I'm kind of everywhere. My heart is in alternative education. There's just not a full-time position right now. So I'm slowly trying to get my way into that. And my dissertation was widely based on looking at preventative strategies to reduce recidivism and things like that. So this is near and dear to my heart. A couple of things. I was supposed to have a co-presenter, Dr. Lauren Barker. She, for lack of a better word, bailed this morning. So if I hesitate on a slide, it's because my fluency is not nearly at the level to which I would desire to have my fluency be on the slides. It's because at 8 o'clock this morning I found out that she wasn't coming. So bear with me. I also just want to give a little bit of a trigger warning. I will be talking about traumatic events. I'm not going to go into detail on trauma, but that's part of this story of the school-to-prison pipeline, right? So I will be reviewing some adverse childhood experiences and the impact of that and talking about racial disparity. So I just want to be mindful that it can be triggering for those who are impacted by that. So I just want to give a disclaimer to that. And then lastly, I also like to share a little bit of my story. I don't know if any of you have gone to MTSS conferences in the past, and it was a big emphasis a couple of years ago. It was like, share your story, share your why. So not only do I practice this work, study this work, nerd out on this work, and advocate for this work, I also, my son, who was a 14-year-old youth when he lived with me in the foster care system, was heavily involved in the juvenile justice system from the time I got him until unfortunately he passed away just about 3 months ago. And so this work of seeing how the education system failed him and seeing how not only being a foster youth, but being a youth of color, and seeing how I got him at the age of 14 after so much damage, for lack of a better word, had been done to him, that the best intervention was for me to love him and give him unconditional positive regard. And sometimes that's the best intervention you can give. So not only do I come from this from a research-heavy behavior analytic approach, I come from it as a mom who battled the system every single day, not only schools, but probation and judges and courts and everybody from Riverside County to Los Angeles Unified all the way up here in San Jose knew who I was at the end of my 5 years of having him be with me. So I like to share that story because this is, I'm not just going to give you a bunch of solutions that researchers study. I know that these are effective, and I wish desperately somebody would have done this with my own son, because at the age of 14, the damage was already quite significant. Okay, so I just like to share that. I'm a human too. So that's a little bit about my why. Really quickly before we get in, can I just get a little bit, what's everyone doing over here? Are you guys teachers, program specialists? How about we start with how many of you work in special education? Okay. How many of you work with alternative education youth? Awesome. How many of you work with therapeutic special day classrooms or different types of behavioral programs? How many of you are admin? Okay. You raise your hand for all the things. Okay, and so everybody else, I'm going to assume, what are y'all doing?
We're gen ed teachers.
Awesome.
We're also co-teaching with classes that include basic all the way through.
Great. Local, San Jose? Santa Clara, okay. Anybody else want to share your experience that you think would be helpful for the lens of which this talk?
I'm in special education at a middle school.
Great.
Although socioeconomic, really kids affected.
Yeah. Okay. That's okay. Yeah, we'll cover all that good stuff. All right, so let's get started because I only have an hour. This topic is like a 6-day seminar. So we'll just cram in as much as I can. Whatever I don't get, I'll email you all the slides. You can also email me. I'll send you whatever you want of my info. Okay, so we're going to start right into some uplifting slides. And by uplifting, I mean the complete opposite. So a grim picture of public education. So this was data taken from 2019 that shows that there's 48,000 youth who are currently involved in the juvenile justice system, whether that be detention centers, residential treatment centers, adult prisons and jails. Depending on the state, there's different rules and laws for what constitutes as an adult offense versus what is a juvenile offense. Long-term secure facilities and other types of detentions. They also include things like wilderness camps, diagnostic centers, and boot camps within those small little percentages over there. But I think the big takeaway is this is like 48,000 kids, babies, are in the juvenile justice system in some way, shape, or form that are not in their homes, are in an incarceration facility of some variety, okay? And again, 2019 numbers suggest more progressive states like California, who's really shifting in the way that we're looking at our punitive practices, and going into more of a rehab approach for students and kids versus a retaliatory, coercive, punishment-based type of treatment of youth who are offenders. That number is likely gone down a little bit because especially after COVID-19, we're trying to reduce the amount of kids that are in systems of incarceration. It seems like more are in the system, but right now I can tell you at our juvenile hall here and in Santa Clara County, there's only currently 48 youth in there, as opposed to 3 or 4 years ago, there were 400 youth in there. So Santa Clara County's doing something right. It seems like a lot more, but Santa Clara County's doing some cool stuff in regards to juvenile delinquency. So school to prison pipeline, these are some statistics I found from the ACLU. School disciplinary policies disproportionately affect Black students. Zero tolerance discipline procedures have resulted in Black students facing disproportionately harsher punishment than white students in public schools. So 51% of all the population of public schools are white students, whereas 16% are Black. Yet 31% of white students receive multiple suspension as comparison to 42% of our Black youth. So that's right from the start, that's incredibly disproportionate with the amount of Black students as compared to white, yeah.
How is it with that?
I have some Black and brown youth today. This is just for our Black youth right now. There's another slide that goes into more depth. Black students represent 31% of school-related arrests. Black students are suspended and expelled 3 times more than white students. And students suspended or expelled for discretionary violations are nearly 3 times more likely to be in contact with the juvenile justice system in the following year. Children being punished into prison. So from school to prison pipeline, here's some data regarding our brown youth or other students of color. 40% of students expelled from the U.S. 40% of students expelled from the U.S. each year are Black. 70% of students involved in in-school arrests or referred to law enforcement are Black or Latino or Hispanic. Black students are 3.5 times more likely to be suspended than white students. Black and Latino students are twice as likely to not graduate high school as white students. Further, going into our foster care system, there's a disproportionality with the amount of Black and brown youth who are in the foster care system as compared to white students. So, 50% of children in the foster care system are Black and brown. 30% of foster care youth entering the juvenile justice system are placement-related behavioral cases. 25% of young people leaving foster care will be incarcerated within a few years of just turning 18. The window is really 18 to 21 where you see the highest spike in incarceration rates. 50% of young people leaving foster care will be unemployed within a few years after turning 18. 60% of all males in state federal prisons do not have a high school diploma. 70% of inmates in California state prisons are former foster youth. I told you it was really uplifting and everything. The color of mass incarceration. 60%, so Black or Latino is 60% of our incarcerated population, although only constitutes 30% of our U.S. population. 1 out of 3 African American males will be incarcerated in their lifetime. 1 in 6 Latino males will be incarcerated in their lifetime. I'm not going to read off the slide, but this is just talking about more of a national perspective. This now brings in special education. There's a disproportionate amount of Black and brown kids who are referred for, I see a lot of nodding, who are referred for special education, right? Kids with disabilities receive harsher, more punitive consequences than their white counterparts. Black and brown youth are 3 times more likely to be referred for special education than white students. The main reasons why kids of color are referred for special education include attentiveness and behavioral problems. Guess what also causes attentiveness and behavioral problems? Trauma. Trauma is not an eligibility category. It is not OHI, that is not emotional disturbance, that is life circumstances that have brought a student there, right? So 5.4% of young children with disabilities have been suspended or expelled compared to 1% of students without disabilities. 1.7 million students are in schools with police but no counselors. 3 million students are in schools with police but no nurses. 6 million students are in schools with police but no school psychologists. 10 million students are in schools with police but no social workers. 14 million students are in schools with police but no counselor, nurse, psychologist, or social worker. Let that sink in. And that's from the ACLU 2015-2016. They have a whole campaign called Cops Not Counselors. They also have this really amazing integrated map, if you go onto the ACLU, that every county in the United States of America, you can click on it and it will tell you the disparities between black and brown youth that are expelled, suspended, numbers of tardies, numbers of retention rates, and all of that. And it's a really fascinating tool. I could spend an hour just going through which county do you work for, which county do you work for, but it's a really interesting integrated way to look at how we're handling disciplinary measures in our schools. This, I understand, is really hard to look at. What I will say, though, why I find this fascinating, is this is in regards to preschool students. How old are you when you're in preschool? 3 if you're on an IEP, 4 if not, right? Preschool children, this is 2005, that number only went up 10 years later when they came back to this. Preschool children are expelled at 3 times the rate of children in kindergarten through 12th grade. 3 and 4-year-olds. These racial and gender, importantly, the majority of these young children, 42% are identified as African American boys. So this starts when kids are 3 or 4. More than 10 years later of the same study, the disproportionate number of male students representing minority populations are expelled, along with ELL learners and students with disabilities, all of whom would benefit from daily attendance in schools. And since this 2005 study, there's been a dramatic increase in the number of preschool suspensions and expulsions. It's crazy. I could end this talk right here, but I'm solutions oriented, so we're not going to do that. So take a moment and think about, what does school discipline look like? Talk in your table. You can join whatever group, or I can talk to you about what does school discipline look like. Things to think about. Do you have social workers? Do you have nurses? Do you have school psychologists? Are they full-time? Are they part-time? Do they have manageable caseloads? Do you have SROs at your campus? Do you have access to that data at your PBIS school? Do you know what your referrals look like? Do you know what your suspensions and expulsions look like? Do you know what your disproportionate? I know the school district I work for got dinged, and we just got dinged again for the disproportionate students of that are EL learners who are getting labeled as SLD. Being a non-English speaker is not a disability, yet we're identifying and over-identifying, right? So take a couple minutes, we'll give you guys about 3 minutes to talk, and then we'll just briefly share out.
Well, we have to.
Which I don't have to, but I. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. And if I could, yeah, I can also notify. HR.
I want to put this on camera. I wanted to send you the article. The article that you had.
No, she wants to talk to you also.
Okay, I need to come on for tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm doing an exit presentation. You know, I had to come here and support you.
Are you staying or are you going?
I was going to go to Ken, but I'm going to stay because I can't advertise.
Yeah, me too.
Right?
I was like, Ken Shelton, double whammy.
Everyone's like, he knows your name. I'm like, he's like my big brother.
Well, let's connect after.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll be here. Hey, you know what we
You
are?
also can go say hi to Ken.
I'm to talk to Ken all the time. So it's fine. It's like my cousin. Yeah. But yeah. This is my first one there. So.
I just passed my PhD already.
Yay! Congratulations! Doctor!
Dr. D.
I'm so proud of you. They did a rub off on me.
All right, y'all. Does anybody want to share out? I can't, unfortunately with time, all of y'all can't share out, but does anybody want to share out something that kind of stood out in regards to school discipline at their school site? Any takers? Nobody?
I will share out.
Great.
So, at our school, we do have PBIS, and we have a tiered system, so we do try to, offer a lot of positive, incentives for students to making good choices and following kind of our core values we have in our school. But we do, have a lot of new teachers in middle school, and, so we have a referral process, right, and an admin makes a decision about discipline for those students. We do have an in-school suspension, alternative. So we have like an alternative classroom, which is like an in-school suspension, and there is out-of-school suspension. But I will say that we have made some changes just about like dress code and certain behaviors that are more tolerated now that weren't tolerated before.
Yeah.
So like the hoodies, hats, things like that, that has fine. Where that used to be a big
Oh yeah.
discipline.
My kid got suspended for having sagging pants.
Yeah. So
Imagine you in that meeting.
we kind of changed our messaging and our outlook that we're glad the kids are in their seats or they're here.
Absolutely.
For learning.
You showed up today.
Yes.
Great. Anybody have SROs at their school? Yeah. How's your relationship with the SROs?
Me and mine and his, like our
No, like with the kids. How do you?
Yeah, not where I think it should be, but
Yeah.
not bad. I think we're working on our supers and our SRO not being so much authoritative as more you're there to help and counseling. And
Yeah.
so when we have meetings in my office and we're in there, I try to use the practices and build some empathy in there. We're not upset at you. They're upset that you had this behavior because they care about you.
Absolutely.
And so we're trying to
Reframe it.
reframe it. They're like, yeah, they're upset, but they're not upset because they don't like you. They're upset that you're here in my office again and they think you can do better.
Totally.
And then as far as what our discipline looks like, I think we are reactive still.
Yeah.
I think we're starting to move more towards prevention measures with we have 2 SEL counselors now on campus.
Awesome.
Our counselors are now not so much ingrained in academics, are actually counseling students with social emotional needs, and they're like diagnosing some, all right, this is a behavior issue, what does this student need to correct your behavior?
Yeah.
Versus, you did this, cheating on a test is automatically when we find out a form, that rubric,
And
that
code
behavior
says.
matches this, right?
Yeah.
Versus, well, no, we can't do that. What does
Yeah.
this kid need? What's the background of the kid? What do they need to be successful, and how do we hold them accountable, but then help them while we're holding them accountable?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I will gloat for a moment, not just because I work with the Inclusion Collaborative and I have nothing to do with the work that's been happening, but at both of the court schools, the ranch down in Gilroy and at the Osborne School, which is the juvenile hall school, they do PBIS and the probation officers are a part of their system. They give out tickets to kids. I saw more tickets given out by probation officers in my little observations that I've done that are in our own school district that is not a court school. So things like that is incredibly, it gives me hope. It gives me, right, I hold on to that because that's if you can change the mindset of a probation officer whose training is not therapeutic in nature, and that they can see kids for who they are, and it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's progress, right? And I'm sorry we can't get to everybody, but we'll have time hopefully later. So trauma and juvenile delinquency. So this is just a statistic taken of the prevalence of ACEs, those adverse childhood educational experiences, early childhood experiences that are by gender. So as you can see, emotional abuse for girls are in, females are in red, and those who identify as male are in blue. 67% of girls have had emotional abuse. This number right here blows my mind still. Physical neglect, 100% of youth in the system that are female had physical neglect. 90% of girls, emotional neglect. Parent or divorce, 85%. And I realize that this is very binary and that, the black and I can't fix the graphic. But I do think it's telling, right? It's info. So at the end of the day, the takeaway is these kids who are in the system do not have normal circumstances. 45% of those who identify as girls in the juvenile justice system have had 5 or more cases. 31% have had sexual abuse, 41% physical, and we kind of already talked about that. Girls experience sexual abuse 4.4 times the rate of boys, which then leads to outcomes of engaging in risky behaviors, promiscuity, drug use, tardiness, not coming to school, school failure, and whatever that might look like for that individual. A quick refresher on what ACEs are. ACEs are those adverse childhood experiences that were studied in Folletti et al. In 1998, the biggest study to ever look at those life circumstances that lead to certain physical and mental outcomes for all of us. 67% of the population have at least one ACE. And those who have 6 or more, so remember, girls have 5 or more ACEs, but those who have 6 or more have a lifetime expectancy that's 20 years less than those who don't. Adverse childhood experiences are the single greatest unaddressed public health threat facing our nation today. COVID only made it worse. I see a lot of nods. It only made it worse. CPS calls, through the roof. Kids having lack of supervision that already didn't have a lot of supervision, quadrupled. I don't have a number, but I was going to say quadrupled because I already felt it. So an evidence-based approach. So I'm going to talk about 2 school-wide, classroom-wide, and then I'm going to go into more specific individual interventions to look at. These are the key trauma-informed SEL practices, because everything we do when we're talking about at-risk youth, or all youth for that matter, should be creating predictable routines, building supportive relationships, empowering student agency, supporting the development of self-regulation skills, and providing opportunities to explore individual and community. Remember, punitive practices increase the likeliness youth will enter the system, do not promote student-positive relationships between the adult and the child, decrease academic achievement, widens the achievement gap, specifically for our kids of color, directly is linked to attendance issues, and does not teach replacement or prosocial behaviors. When we live in a punitive, punishment-based world, kids do not learn the skills they need. A 4-year-old, I will argue with anybody who will fight me on this, I don't think any of you would, a 4-year-old does not have the ability to regulate their emotions. That part of their brain isn't even fully developed at the age of 4. Yet they're getting suspended and expelled for behaviors that I would argue many 4-year-olds. I have an 18-month-old, and I get woken up with a full hand, 5-finger slap to the face every day. He just comes up and wham, slaps me in the face. And, I don't put him into timeout. I go, oh, here's our grenade. You can take your job if you want. I teach him a replacement behavior. And he's 18 months old. All right. I'm not going to go into a whole PBIS thing because that's not my job. And also, that's a whole nother avenue. However, PBIS can be trauma informed. PBIS just came out with a whole thing in 2019 about how to make PBIS, your matrices, and all of that trauma informed. Here's just an example of that. With your Tier 1 components over here of defining and teaching school-wide expectations, feedback and acknowledgement, and the supervision, they embedded teaching coping skills, talking about social, emotional, and behavioral lessons, using morning circle to build community and instill relationships, using feedback to talk about positive, calm responses, and all of these different things. And then they made sure in their matrix, those SEL components that I just shared, in these areas, is it trauma informed? Some of it can't be super trauma informed, like active supervision. You can have elements of it, not necessarily teaching or replacing, so that's going to get checked off in other sections. But how can you turn, if you're a PBIS school site, how can you bring this idea of trauma informed practices and those pillars of SEL back to your leadership team, back to your PBIS team? Because little changes in how we talk about behavior will be impactful for our youth, especially those who are already at risk for being in the system. Here's another example for William Way High School Way, fake school. Here are their 3 behaviors they focus on: respectful, organized, achieving, and responsible. And look what they added in bold: greet the classmates and teachers. Check, building a relationship and building community. Offer to help, apologize for mistakes, teaching prosocial behaviors. Listen and understand, consider the feelings of others, teaching prosocial behaviors. And then over here, they have a whole section. When I'm upset, what can I do? I can take a break. I can use a coping skill. I can do all of these things that I'm learning. I'm not being sent to the office. I'm not getting sent home. I'm not getting sent away from the situation in which this behavior occurred. In the moment, I'm getting taught a lesson, and I'm given the skills that not only will create and nurture a positive relationship between the adults and the students, but an entire school community can be transformed by this, and it's through a trauma-informed lens. These buttons, I can't hold it, I'm not good. Okay, before I hit play, how many of you have heard about the good behavior game? I love the good behavior game. I didn't realize those few people were raised their hands. I didn't think I had to explain it. Well, I'll explain it real quick. It's a behavior analytic approach of a classroom-wide management system where you basically break your classroom into teams, you set norms for your team, and you work together, really instilling pro-social behaviors in your classroom, utilizing those expectations, using the same consistent language on what those expectations are, and you work together as a team to have a certain reinforcement, to have a certain reward, to have a certain something that everyone's working towards weekly, bi-weekly, whatever it is that's established. I'm not doing it justice, but it's amazing. And in a study that was done in 1985-1986 in Baltimore, they found that in inner city schools, kids who received the good behavior game at the age of 9, so 3rd graders, when they did a 10-year follow-up, the kids who got the good behavior game had decreased juvenile delinquency, as opposed to the kids who did not get the good behavior game, less substance use, less risky behaviors, didn't have as many issues with obesity and weight and other unhealthy habits, had less substance use, and had less suicidality. Just by being told you're doing a good job and having those kids learn how to teach other kids how to build a community of nurturance. So this is a video I'm going to show that's about the PACS Good Behavior Game. The PACS Good Behavior Game is just one version of the Good Behavior Game. If you want more info on bringing this to your school, come and see me. I work with PACS and I do research with PACS. We're doing the Good Behavior Game right now in our SDC classrooms in my current school district through PACS. And if you want more info, I'm happy to talk afterwards or set you up with an email that you can reach out to.
The PACS Good Behavior Game is a system of evidence-based strategies that are used throughout the day in order to help children learn different skills that they need to be successful learners.
Have your attention, please. Look to see what group you're sitting at. That will be your PACS team.
PACS works well with kindergarten because you're constantly restating the behaviors that you want to see, and the kids like working towards the games. They encourage each other and those good behaviors.
Katie, good peaceful problem solving.
All day long, kids can be using these kernels and learning about self-regulation. The part that the kids usually love the best is the reward, which is the Granny Wacky Prize.
Kindergartners need a lot of transitions, and so when you're able to stop and quick do a 30-second wacky game, it makes a big difference, and then they're able to refocus quicker.
We can do fun stuff. There's a time and a place for that. Let's get the wiggles out real quick and let's pull it back around and get refocused.
All right, we're done. All right, you got 30 seconds to pick up all the paper and go.
PAX makes me a better fifth grader because when I do PAX, it helps me concentrate a little bit more.
In Elkhart County, we have teachers who are trained for PACS in all 7 county school districts. They are able to call us here at Horizon Education Alliance and say, you know, we need some help with this. Where are we at? Is there additional training that could be done? Beardsley Elementary School is our first PAC school to do school-wide.
All right, Beardsley Bulldogs, thank you for getting PACs quiet.
My fellow administrators, if you choose to implement PACs, you will buy back time. You will buy back time for the academic pieces, for the social emotional pieces.
And if you have the system in place, you're going to have the behaviors that you expect, and you're going to be able to teach and have fun. We've had so much fun this year with this class.
I can't see myself teaching without it. From where I was in 2012 and my classroom management styles to where I am now is 2 total ends of the spectrum.
The other really cool thing is they purposely used a harmonica with PACs because the sound of a harmonica is not triggering, whereas a whistle, sometimes clapping of hands and a loud noise, can be incredibly triggering for youth who have experienced trauma. A harmonica is a low-level tone that does not evoke the same type of response. So even down to the prompt to get kids back into the routine was thoughtful, in that everybody gets a harmonica, right? So if you're interested in the PACS Good Behavior game, come at me after. You'll have my email as well, and I can set you up with some resources for it. You don't have to pay for it, but your school district always has money, so they can find things to support SEO. So, and if not, we'll figure it out. But no, honestly, it's an amazing tool, and if it gets started in elementary, imagine the implications for when those kids get older. You can also do it in middle schools. Although I would love to see some teachers in my current school district get into a paper ball fight. There's no way that would fly in the schools I work at. It should fly, but it would not fly. All right, so some other interventions. Coming back, remembering predictable routines. We're gonna look at each of these areas, and I'm gonna provide some suggestions of some evidence-based trauma-informed preventative strategies that we can utilize that will greatly impact our students. Predictable routines. Greet the students at the door with an affirming statement and provide pre-corrections and instructions before or as they're entering. Tell your students the specific behavioral expectations. Have a handshake. Did you all see that video during COVID with the teacher who was doing all the crazy handshake things that I will never be that cool? I aspire, but I could never be that cool. That guy wins. Have a handshake or a special greeting. For elementary, you could have a sharing circle. This could look different in middle school, but you can still have a community circle in the beginning. It does not a restorative circle. It's a community building time where you talk about a topic. It's kind of more like a round table type of approach. A group check-in chart. How y'all feeling today, right? Not a clip chart where you clip down. No. Again, no. But a how y'all feeling? If you're feeling like the sunshine, put your name over here. If you're feeling a little cloudy and foggy, put your name over here. If you don't know how you feel, you're partly cloudy, partly sunny, then we're over here. It's engaged with the teacher, because if that kid who says they're foggy goes into their calm corner and is taking a nap, I'm going to say you probably needed that right now, because I don't know what's going on at home. I don't know how you slept last night, right? And that gives you data first thing in the morning about how your student is. Have a 2-minute activation knowledge activity. Have an engaging task post on the board with materials readily available. Question posted to class, a reflection, a fun activity, starting the day off positive. When you give your students this, guess what you also have? You have time for an effective and efficient system of attendance. Because if the kids are busy doing something, you can walk around and you can do those little individual check-ins. If the kid has their head down, if the kid said they were foggy, you can now personally go and check in with that student and say, I noticed that you were feeling foggy this morning, what's going on? They might tell you something, they might not tell you something, but it's you checking in and connecting and acknowledging and seeing that student that is the thing that builds that relationship, which, as I said earlier, is monumental in a child's academic and social emotional success. Continue to provide instructions and affirming statements about expected behaviors throughout the day. Check student progress on the activation of that knowledge activity, especially if you know some kids who really have a hard time getting started in the morning. Pump them up. Pump them up. Give them something easy that they can do. Let them feel loved and safe and secure. Those first 10 minutes of the day will bleed into success for the rest of the day. Students who arrive tardy are greeted with a nonverbal gesture and instructed to quietly join the classroom. I cannot tell you one of my biggest pet peeves is when a kid walks in late and the teacher makes a whole to-do about it and not the positive to-do. Oh, you're late again. Go over here. You missed so much already. I know I'm not the only person who sees that. I see it every day. Oh, what happened? Did your mom have a hard time taking you to school today? Yeah, it's insane. Check in with student at a later time. Let them get in, let them get situated. You know what the best thing you can say to a student who's late is? I'm so happy you're here. Thanks for coming today. Prompt the student to ask what they need, and then you can have another student even say, hey, you know, Julie was late today. Samantha, can you go tell Julie what she missed? And then it's not that they have to catch it up. If they're there for the last minute, they're there for the last minute. It's not, gotcha, now you have to do what everybody else did in 10 minutes in 1 minute. It's welcoming them in a nurturing, inclusive environment. Other predictable routines. Have expectations clearly posted. Avoid saying no. Instead of no hitting, no kicking, no this, no that. No. Instead, safe hands. Raising your hand if you have a question. Quiet voices. Keeping hands and body to self. Having an interact, whatever you call it. Stated in terms that are clearly observable. Instead of gather all needed materials at the start of class is better than be responsible. How many times do you hear be responsible or be kind, be respectful? I have a hard time with the word respect. I have ODD, I think, so I have a hard time with that word. And so I don't tell me to respect you, because I'll ask you what that means, what that looks like, how you expect that, make it observable and measurable for me, please. But the same thing for our students. Tell me explicitly what you want me to do and I will do it. If you tell me this vague term, I'm not going to do it, because I don't know what you mean half the time. And then be brief. Use kind words is better than, and kid-friendly. Don't say, be considerate of others, or don't be a bully. I hear that all the time. Use kind words. Right? Our words matter. How we talk to kids, how we post our expectations, all of that is significant for how our kids are welcomed into the classroom. Build strong supportive relationships. This is a non-exhaustive list of just ideas that teachers can do, but again, this is that second pillar of building a student-teacher relationship, that supportive relationship that greatly impacts outcomes academically and socially, emotionally for kids. Teacher joins student in a game during recess, whole class board game time, teacher book reading, where the teacher reads from one of the kids' favorite books, lunch bunch, you have a whole class party with music, art and music, that they don't have to do an academic task one day, they can do something fun. One day without Eureka math, nothing will be ruined, it'll be okay, everyone will move on. Where they can listen to their own jams. I used to work in Compton Unified School District, and I told the kids, okay, yeah, we can listen to your own music. Well, let me tell you. It was cool until they all just knew that I was from Jersey, so I would sneak in some East Coast hip hop, and they would all get really mad at me. And it was funny, but it built a relationship, because I could be like, I'll take your Tupac and I'll raise you 2 Biggies and some Common and some Wu-Tang Clan, and they were all looking at me like, what? And I was like, no, like I know I'm very white. But let me tell you, I'm from right outside of New York. Let's go. But that was a connection for me. It started some battles. The kids used to pump their chest at me all the time, and I'd be like, I don't care, sit down, Tupac. They both are dead. Let's go. And we would, but it would become, that's how we related. And they let them listen to the music they wanted to. Why do I care? Good notes or calls home, know your audience. Not everybody, that'll be a positive thing. Some parents look at that as an annoyance if you're calling about something. Also, if there's a repeated pattern of only getting called for the bad, every time they see your name show up, You're evoking a response of what did they do now? But if we're in that cycle, my question is, why are they only getting calls when the kid's doing something bad? Mentor helper, have the big kids go to the little kids, right? You can have a kindergartner, even go into a pre-K classroom. I've done that before, right? Have someone show off that they can do something. Any range, age range, you can have a kid be a helper. That means another adult that they could possibly have on that campus who sees them as being able to build a relationship. Get to know your students, model positive relationships, whole classroom reward system, and lots and lots and lots of praise. Empower student agency, give you choice and voice in how students master content. Write about a topic of choice, offer choices, let students choose how they want to execute that plan and assignment, use asset-based language, acknowledge their resiliency and strength, as well as acknowledge all the good you see, the attempts and the almosts. I don't care if you don't get it done, did you try? Coming back to, did you show up today? Check. Did you pick up your pencil and write your name on a piece of paper? I'm going to do a backflip for that. Did you attempt the assignment? Do backflips. More self-agency, have students set goals for themselves, achievable ones, break it down into short-term, long-term, medium-term. I have a group of middle school girls that I asked them the other day, I was like, what do you guys want to do when you grow up? It was such a stupid question, but they just sometimes seem kind of lost, and they all come to me with their boy problems, and their principal yelled at me again, and I'm always like, okay, let's talk. And I was like, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do when you get to high school or beyond? And out of the 5 kids, not a single one of them had a goal for themselves. So I helped them. One now wants to be a nail tech, another one wants to maybe go to dental school, right? Like we talked about it, we had conversations. I let them know that they're worthy of an outcome. It doesn't have to be the same outcome that's been modeled for them. So set goals with your students, promote journaling, show off the students' work. I love when kids can showcase their work. We're talking about this at the alternative ed program right now. Have one of the students show off that amazing work that they did on building a bed for the program. They're doing a whole hydroponic program there, and they had to make blueprints. And one of them was, one of the best blueprints. I'm no blueprint expert, but it looked really good. So I was like, wow, you should show this off to your classmates. This is amazing. Have them talk about their work. Find what motivates them, asking them what their values are. Tying their goals to their values. It's never too young to talk about the things that are important, and that gives you insight into where your kids are and how to promote that resiliency and that self-agency in them. Repeat back what students told you in their words. I'm hearing that. It sounds like, right? And just repeat what they say, because then they know that you're listening to them and you're not brushing them off, and that they have your attentiveness when they're sharing something that is of value to them. Self-regulation, how can your physical space be trauma-informed? Having calm-down areas, having calm-down materials. Reach out to me if you need any of these things. I have a bunch of stuff. Positive motivational images and quotes, but not too overwhelming and stimulating, because that can also be a trigger for some students, especially if you have them make their own work, or they share their own quotes. That can be a great activity for the kids to do, and then they get to post their work, their voice on the wall in the classroom. It promotes a safe environment for kids, and it's also incredibly trauma-informed. Here are some examples. I can tell you, when I was a student many years ago, I did not have a calm corner, and I would have greatly benefited one, because I was a desk-flipping, cursing, defiant little girl from New Jersey. And when I just went to the principal's office every day, pretty much. It was my educational career. I got sent to the principal's office in middle school and high school and beyond. So I had some anger issues, but no one addressed them with me. I just got sent to the office all the time. So these are great. Other self-regulation, having mindful minutes. There's also, I labeled a specific meditation called Souls of the Feet. I can give you a copy of it. It's great. We use it in a lot of our elementary schools. Embedded breaks, other mindfulness practices. I go and teach. My dissertation was on mindfulness, and I'm also a yoga teacher. I teach at the prisons.
and staying open and silliness. And I do some mindfulness walking with the inmates and do a mindfulness eating activity, and the POs will allow me to do so. So I'm a practitioner of this stuff, and I also have done it with our students. I go in, I did it not in Eric Scherer, I did it in one of your classrooms actually, where I taught his whole classroom a mindfulness, we ate a raisin mindfully. And the kids loved it, and it was pretty great. And that just generalized into a mindful minute every day in the classroom and different things like that. Modeling a calm body, if us as the educators are being responsive and non-reactive, guess what the kids will be? Responsive and non-reactive as well, right? Our words matter. What do you need? Thank you for joining us. How can I help you? I'm so glad you're here. I can see you're upset. How can I help? Sometimes the best words matter is no words. Right? Sometimes just acknowledging, I'll be back and check on you in 5 minutes. Not, what's wrong? What's going on? Because if we start nagging, that's not going to work out well for anybody. So thinking about how our words matter. How we think about our students and how we talk to our students is a direct representation of what that student feels that we think about them. These are just some examples of, for specific behaviors, how you can flip it into something positive. So for the oppositional angry student, I'm so proud of you for cooperating when you see them on task. I'm proud of you for using your words. Hyperactivity, way to keep your hands to yourself. Excellent job sitting in your seat. Thanks for not hitting anybody. I hear it quite often. Inattention, great job following directions. I can tell you're listening, great job. Not, well, look who finally decided to listen today. It hits a little different, right? Here are just other preventative strategies. We already talked about a lot of these, communicating using simple, direct sentences, showing your body language, how you show up in a classroom. If you're walking with your hands crossed, if you're walking towards somebody, going directly in front of their midline, that's incredibly intimidating. Getting a chair next to them, not coming at them straight forward, is one simple preventative way. Not coming from behind them, being like, ooh, surprise, let's talk about what's going on. Be mindful of your body placement and their body placement. Designated areas for de-escalation, a calm space, or if you have that on your campus. I'm not talking about the old school padded rooms we used to use, but like a happy, healthy, calm space. School psychologist's office, the counseling office sometimes has these if you don't have it in your own classroom. Helping kids regulate their emotions by identifying them. Use shortcuts and code words. I have a couple of kids who will give me a bird call. They'll do this. And I'm like, okay, let's go for a walk, let's go. Right? Or they'll do me a hand gesture, or they'll do something, they'll just look at me, I have a kid who does this. Okay, let's go take a break. And we'll go outside, and we'll go walk around, right? And that's all they need sometimes. It's just like, let's go do a loop. Let's do a loop, and then we'll go back in, let's check in. How are you feeling about being back in class? And then I prompt the teacher, can you welcome them back in and say, I missed you, I'm so happy you're back. And it increases the outcome significantly when that kid feels welcome back in their classroom. And then bringing in that individual and community identity, having kids share about themselves, if it's appropriate, that can also be incredibly triggering. Also for middle school and high school, you might hear some things you don't want to hear, and you just have to kind of deal with it. You might sometimes hear things that you're like, oh, your favorite color is red? Okay, tell me more about that. Oh, okay, that is what you do outside of school? Okay, great, but they're sharing something about you, and it's not always true. A lot of kids flex and go, showcase their work, share with the family. Again, know your audience. Sometimes that can be a trigger for families if you've created a cycle of punishment with the family. Engagement between home and school, using anti-bias frameworks that promote inclusivity and promote cultural awareness. This is a whole slide on it. This is a whole presentation on itself. DEI and how to do, addressing implicit bias and looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. But those things matter. Having your kids feel seen in your classroom by just getting to know them matters. And you can do that as young as pre-K all the way up to kindergarten. Showcasing what foods do you eat when you go home. Not everyone eats a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? So how can you have them talk about what their lunch is? Or what do they do when they go home? Or what do they do on the weekends? Not everyone has a sweet 16. We call it different things in different cultures. What does that look like? Tell us about that. Inform us about that. giving back to community, having kids, work with the community that they work with, students, families, and staff, showing up in your kids' community. I used to volunteer in Compton and Watts and Skid Row every single weekend, because that's where my kids were coming from. So I would show up, and I would pretend to do sports. I don't know anything about sports, and I would pretend really hard. I'm horrible at sports, and I would play basketball with all these kids who were very great at sports in LA Unified School District in Compton, and I would get schooled. They would whoop me in sports, but I showed up every weekend, and it just became funny for them to all see me fail miserably, and it was okay. It was humbling. It was very humbling. But I showed up every weekend because I didn't just want them to know that I was there Monday through Friday. I was there when they needed me, and I cared about the things that they cared about. And so this is how I'm going to end it. So for the purpose of this, I changed their name to Caesar. Caesar was a student that I worked with at one of the middle schools I worked with. When I met him, he was 13 years old. And over the weekend, I met him on a Monday, and that previous weekend, he had gotten involved in the juvenile justice system. He made a real stupid decision on a Saturday night. That morning, he came to school and was the parent had kind of informed the school that there might be a probation officer or police officer who now shows up at the school day. Anytime that happens, people usually loop me in because they know my experience of fighting that system, and also I know the system well, and I know a lot of, unfortunately, I know a lot of the probation officers in San Jose, so chances were I was going to know who the PO was as well. So they just introduced me to the student who I hadn't really known. He'd come up a couple of times, but wasn't directly on my radar. So I met him, and I said, hey, what's up, Caesar? Heard you do something real dumb this weekend. What's up, buddy? And we talked about it, and he opened up to me, and I just was like, okay. And I didn't shame him. I just said, all right, well, what are we going to do now? Let's look at your grades. Let me see how you're doing at school. How do you feel about school? How do you feel? What's going on outside of home? We just did like a 30-minute, he shared what he wanted to share. I was incredibly thoughtful about how I asked the questions. And what I gathered was he was houseless, his dad was incarcerated, he was one of 7 kids, he wanted to be involved in gangs, really wanted to be, and had some influences outside that made it such that he could easily get roped into that, and he was failing every single class. He had a 0 GPA, just straight through. And I was like, how did you make it this far with a 0 and you never do, right? Like, I'm like, what's going on? So I said, okay, how do you feel about school? And he was like, oh, I'm profiled. I'm like, what do you mean you're profiled? And he said, well, I'm the brown kid who wears red shoes that are Olympics on my little team new, and the teachers are afraid of me. And I said, do you think the teachers are afraid of you? And he said, yeah, no, every teacher is afraid of me. Anytime I go to the bathroom, I get questioned, and people ask me, what am I doing? And he's sharing his experience, which up to this point was incredibly negative. And I'm like, well, we're going to change that, Caesar. What's the subject that you like? So for the last 4 or 5 weeks up to school, I said 3 days a week I'm going to come for a period, you pick which period, and we're going to catch you up on some work. Right? I'm not going to make you do anything outside of school because that's not fair. I'm not going to make you go to homework club because you likely won't be able to get home after homework club. So let's just work together. So I was able to get his GPA up to a 1.5, which was significant for this kid. He also had about 40-something absences for the entire school year, and those 4 weeks he didn't miss 1 day of school. And one day he tried not coming. I showed him at his door with McDonald's. He said, not today, homie. You're coming to school. And we walked to school together. So we're going through all of this, and so he graduates, gets promoted. I find out he's going to a high school that he cannot go to because there are kids there that he was involved with stuff that's not safe for him to go. So we transferred him to a different high school. He then calls me on his mom's cell phone over the summer. And I was like, hey, Caesar, what's up? Right? Like, how are you? He's graduated now. We're a K-8 district, so I don't usually stay in touch with many of our high schoolers unless they ask. So he calls me and says, I have these probation hours, can you help me get them done? And I was like, maybe? No one's ever asked me that, let me see. So since August, Caesar and I have been doing weekly, sometimes 3 times a week, because he has a bunch of hours he needed to get done. I did his probation hours with him, and he needed 45 hours to complete, and he had to get it done by yesterday. And yesterday he completed all 40 of his hours, and part of it I looked at his attendance, and I was like, I need to look at your attendance. Go on my computer and let me see your grades and your attendance. History, he's attended every single day, and he's still houseless. He still wears a hell bunch of red. The intervention was me showing up for him. Did it take a lot of time? Absolutely. Am I suggesting that that's the intervention that you do? No, but this was a kid who made it 3 years with failing grades, where nobody knew his story. I also found out he was colorblind in my time working with him, so half of the content he couldn't even access that was on a computer. So I printed out everything for him. I find out he's above grade level in math, and he's like a math lead. And he's just gifted in many different areas, and all he needed was for someone to show up for him. And I was that person. I don't say that as a humble brag, I say that as you can be that one person. You can show up for a student, you can find someone to connect him with. He's in counseling now, he's in an anti-gang program, he has mentoring, and he has straight B's across the board. This is a kid with straight F's, who had no adult who liked him, or he perceived had no adult who liked him on his campus. And now his future hopefully is a little bit more bright. So, if that's what you take away, connect to your kids, promote connecting with the kids, finding a way to connect is not only trauma informed, but it could also significantly decrease the likeliness of these kids who end up in the system. Which I showed you already. It's a grim picture out there, but we have kids all day. We have kids from various walks of life, and your school systems are a safe environment for kids that can nurture communities of kindness, growth, and security that they don't have outside of school. So, I know I shared a lot of information, and there's probably some slides you'll want access to or some things. If you have any questions, this is my email, you can always email me. But if you have any questions, we have 0 minutes, maybe 1. And I'm happy to answer anything this day after later.
There's 1 minute if anybody has any questions.